Welcome to Watchtower History.
I'm Michael. I was born in as a witness. I'm fourth generation. Grew up in a witness family, good parents, wonderful family. My family has a long history of being in the Watchtower. And growing up, I did everything I was supposed to do. It was in the congregation, if you weren't an elder or a ministerial servant, you were basically worthless. So the only friends I was allowed to have would be people in the congregation. We were not allowed to have anyone that we could associate with. I did have a lot of fun at home with my parents, my sisters. There's 8 of us all together. But as I got older, I began to see the hypocrisy within the organization, and it started to unravel as I got older because I lost my father, and he had served as an elder many years, and when he became no use, he was forgotten about. And then 4 years later to the day that I lost him, I lost my mother. And so I began to be in a tailspin. But I kept doing everything right. My wife and I, we raised our children, our 4 children, as witnesses. And I was appointed as an elder. And I began my first elders meeting, I thought this has got to be the biggest joke in town. Because the first meeting, it was like a boys' club. And as I went on through with different judicial committees, and I saw how people were just basically a number with the way that the Elders Manual had you handle certain cases, it made me sick. So I began to do a lot of research, and I began to find the doctrines. First of all, the overlapping generation, when that came out, all my life I had been told that as time, the end drew closer, that the number would dwindle and then the end would come. And when that overlapping generation that David Splain tried to explain, it was a joke. And I think to myself, what individual with the mentality would believe this? And through my research, I came upon the Australian Royal Commission, and I was appalled by what I had heard come from Jeffrey Jackson's mouth about the mouthpiece, them being the only ones that were the mouthpiece of God. And he said that would be, I can't remember the name or the term he used, but that it would be presumptuous for them to believe that. Well, in Watchtower culture, these men, the governing body, are set up on this pedestal. As a child, I remember thinking that they were actually getting messages from Jehovah God on what to do. And then when I saw that, it really made me start to wonder. And I read Raymond Fran's Crisis of Conscience. And I saw how he had a crisis of conscience. And it bothered me that I had sat on judicial committees that made me sick. When you have a young woman, 20 years old, who had sex, and they want to know every intimate detail of what went on, first of all, that's none of their business. I'm a father. I've got 3 daughters. It would make me just infuriated if my daughters had to sit there and give out intimate details. I have seen people who were related to high-ranking elders, and I would see them we'll just keep this quiet. But then you'd have another member of the congregation who came and confessed, and you could tell they were repentant, that they were truly sorry, and they would be disfellowshipped. I got tired of the child abuse that was running rampant within the organization. The letters that we would receive. We had one move into our congregation, And I wanted to go and warn the other families in the congregation that this individual was a danger. And because I directed some of these families to look on the sex offender registry, I got put basically what I was called apostate watch is what I was put on. So from that time forward, there were things that just really just started to overwhelm me. And mentally, psychologically, I could not handle it. And so I kept this quiet to myself for a long time. I came to a breaking point with the last judicial committee that I was forced to be on. And during this judicial committee, I said, stop. You don't have to sit here and you don't have to go into these details. We're all adults here. And from that moment on, I was ostracized. I was marked. So I stepped down as an elder and I wrote a letter why I was stepping down. I was asked if I thought that the governing body was the mouthpiece and under direction from Jehovah God. I told them, watch the Australian Royal Commission.
Does the governing body, or do the members of the governing body, do you see yourselves as modern day disciples, the modern day equivalent of Jesus' disciples?
We certainly hope to follow Jesus and be his disciples.
And do you see yourselves as Jehovah God's spokespeople on earth?
That, I think, would seem to be quite presumptuous to say that we are the only spokesperson that God is using. The scriptures clearly show that someone can act in harmony with God's Spirit in giving comfort and help in the congregations. But if I could just clarify a little, going back to Matthew 24, clearly Jesus said that in the last days, and Jehovah's Witnesses believe these are the last days, there would be a slave, a group of persons who would have responsibility to care for the spiritual food. So in that respect, we view ourselves as trying to fulfill that role.
Jeffrey Jackson himself said that would be presumptuous. Their answer to that was, well, this man, they probably photoshopped and did video trickery to make him say that. And I said, I've watched the official documentary on it, and that did not happen. He said those things. And so from then on, I quit going to the Kingdom Hall. I've been asked to go to my own judicial committee. I refuse to do so. They have tried to come between my wife and my children, saying that my children are fatherless because I don't go to the meetings, that I no longer believe in their doctrine. First of all, I'm not a deadbeat dad. I work 80, 90 hours a week to care for my wife and my children. I still am a believer in Jesus. I'm not an atheist. I know many that leave Watchtower, they turn to that, and that's their privilege. That's their right. We were born with free will. But myself, I still believe in the Bible and in Jesus Christ. One other doctrine was, all of my life, I was taught that Jesus Christ was my mediator. And then when that teaching changed, that those 8 men in New York City were my mediator between me and my Heavenly Father, it disgusted me. And so I left. And at this time, I'm shunned, been shunned by people that I've been friends with that I truly love. I don't have a problem with the rank and file Jehovah's Witness. Still love them. If they called me tonight and said they needed help, as a child of Christ, I would go do that for them. But I can no longer accept or be under the rule of the 8 governing body members up in New York City. or Warwick as they are at now. My wife had been approached by elders, and she was told that she should leave me because I'm mentally diseased, that I'm a danger to my children and to her spiritually. They have had other people contact her, other men, and I squashed that. That's not happening. Now, my wife is a wonderful woman. She's a God-fearing woman. We made our vows to each other before God, not to the Watchtower organization. And so I don't want to go into a lot of the detail for legal reasons of what's happened, but there will be no one come between my wife and my children. That is my steadfast action right now. But one thing that I want to share is I have a good friend, my best friend, and I won't name his name right now because he's in a mental health facility. To give you a short story, he and his wife were expecting a baby. When the child was born, she would not let him sign the birth certificate because she had been having an affair with an elder in another congregation. She was not disciplined. This elder was not disciplined, but because my friend was vividly upset, as you can imagine, went and he would go to other elders. He would call the branch. He was disfellowshipped. As a result, he became suicidal, and he did try to take his own life. Now, at this time, I do not know where he's at. He's in protection from himself in a medical facility. But that's just some of the harm that the Watchtower Society has done to people. My whole life has been turned upside down because I questioned the doctrine and the procedures of the Watchtower Bible Tract Society. All of my friends that I've ever had, I live in a small town, and I'll walk up to someone and say, "Hey, how are you doing?" And they turn around and look at you and say they can't talk to me, or they'll ignore me. That's not Christian. Jesus taught us to do unto others as we would have men do unto us. And I try my best to follow the golden rule. But that's just a snippet of my story. And in later time, I will share more of it. Thank you.
Wow. What's scary is this isn't an isolated case. I mean, going to people's family and wives telling them you're mentally ill, you're sick. I'm laughing at how bizarre it is. It's not, wow. I mean, what else do you say?
I mean, even going to them and saying, well, he committed spiritual adultery, so you should divorce him. You have every right to divorce him because he committed spiritual adultery. And oh, by the way, you can marry me. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. And the gentleman that he was talking about, he's tried to commit suicide at least 3 times now, as far as we know, because of how distraught Watchtower has made him because of the situation.
Wow. And it's funny reading some of the comments sent and emails, and this, we get a lot of comments from Jehovah's Witnesses in private emails. Some of them are condoning the disfellowship. This is it. This is your disfellowshipping practice right here. And I like the part. I mean, that's how I would be. I mean, if somebody came into a congregation who was a known predator, I mean, am I not going to tell my friends, hey, watch out for this guy. Don't be alone with him. Because the Watchtower gives this impression that if you're a brother in good standing, everything's just wonderful and great. And they'll allow, naive, innocent people will allow someone like that into their home. Even, I mean, what if it was a single woman sister with a child? I mean, no one would tell her. It's just there's no reasoning behind this.
And we said this elsewhere in this discussion as well. You know, Jesus was accused of hanging out with publicans and sinners. Yet, when these individuals even look for help from their friends who are even marked, they can get disfellowshipped. Or they're not part of the good old boys club, as he was talking about. They can be disfellowshipped for questioning the elder.
Well, you know, I could speak firsthand on that. I mean, I've told you my story. My grandmother was a super pioneer and all that back when, 175 hours? I thought it was 150. I just got reminded it was 175 or something back then. And I got away with more because of her. You know, they looked the other way. You know, I was at the good end, for whatever you call it, but being young, you don't realize what the other people are going through and what's happening, you know, when you're, you know, a teenager and whatnot. But looking back in memory, yeah, it was obvious. If you're a nobody or can't, you know, perform to the level of something, will be judged harsher. And like he said, I've known situations where they buried it because it was an elder's daughter, son, or whatever. And yes, I personally have seen elders cheating on their wives and it going away, not being reported. So he's right. It's a good old boys club.
And we've seen some of that in The Man Who Dared Disfellowship Rutherford, where the one guy wanted to divorce his wife and get married to another one, and he went and asked the Pope for help. I mean, he went and asked Rutherford for help, and it was granted. And we can see it, and we can verify it is documented in the census record. So there's no question that yet now there's a new woman's name just a few years later on there. So even looking at the state federal census, you can see the name change within that few year period. But, you know, a lot of this is just attitude. You know, it's like the Good Samaritan on the road, or the example that was in that 1974 Watchtower. If, you know, a disfellowship person, or let's say it was a woman, and her car broke down and she had a flat tire or something in front of the Kingdom Hall, wouldn't the Christian thing to do would be to help them? Not walk around them, not stay away from them.
But you're dealing with a lot of those people mentality that you have to tell them that that's the right thing to do, as if they get pleasure not doing that. So you got to tell them. And going back again, something he said about the governing body and messages from God. People, that goes back and forth. It's comical. Is the current thing apparently they're not getting messages from God anymore because they were the mouthpiece. So what is the current? Bring me up to speed on that.
Well, if you look in the Watchtowers, they are the mouthpiece of God. That's
what I thought. Yeah, right. I've read that.
But in the Australia Royal Commission, when Jeffrey Jackson of the governing bodies put on the stand and he's questioned this exact thing, he says, "Oh, it would be presumptuous of us to say this." So is it presumptuous or is it true? Well, you know, why don't you tell them when you're put on the stand the same thing that you tell them in your literature? And so that's why a lot of people, you know, are starting to think or at least question what the world's going on here.
The only way you can really, what happens, what I've seen in court cases, like that, like the Royal Australian Commission. Yes, they're bringing the religion to task. Okay. But it's the government officials and the Watchtower officials. What they need to do is get people like us to sit there as fact checkers with laptops. Wait, no, here, this is what you said. This is the date, and do that. Unfortunately, the government is, and not that it's their fault, but the government is unaware of the actions and the activities and what the Watchtower does. But you almost need like an expert there who can guide the tribunals, the governments, on how to handle this, because it's sad. It's an abysmal failure. And you look at through, I read years ago, an attorney was saying that the divorce with Jehovah's Witnesses are the most nasty, disgusting ones. The child custody cases are even worse. And if you're familiar with parental alienation syndrome, PAS, where one parent will block the other parent out of the life, that is like statistically tremendously higher in the Jehovah's Witnesses. So there's stuff going on that does need to be addressed.
But even love, your own child. So this gentleman that Michael was talking about, that he's tried to commit suicide now several times, when his own father was told that he's in a mental institution for his own safety, he basically said he didn't care. He's dead to me.
That is
there's no
basically. He said it. He's dead.
There's no love or concern there at whatsoever. I don't find that Christian at all, regardless of whether or not you agree with, they're not agreeing with the society. And so when I see how, this father treated his own son and basically said, "You're dead to me," and knowing that he's tried to commit suicide multiple times, I find that abhorrent and completely opposite of how a Christian should be, regardless of whether or not you agree with them disagreeing or agreeing with the Watchtower Society. That's as far away from Christian as one could possibly be.
And they don't see how others view them. I mean, they talk about pagans and heathens and apostates and those in Babylon the Great. But those aforementioned people don't treat people like that. And if, I don't care, anybody's son does something, if he's committing suicide or attempting suicide, there's something wrong there. So if you're a great Jehovah Witness, at least say, okay, he's not a Jehovah Witness because he's mentally ill. There's something wrong with him. They just, it's appalling. I give this man a tremendous amount of credit and an encouragement to him. I found he said he couldn't handle it. And it's amazing how in the Watchtower, they look at somebody like that as weak and weak mind. They don't have the fortitude to stand by Jehovah's law. The reality of it is, if you can handle that, behaving like that, there's something wrong with you. And I personally find it hard that God wants to populate the earth with people who would think that way.
Yeah. For people who have no understanding of, let me rephrase that. For people that can't understand that their children are mentally ill, that they need help, that they've tried to kill themselves because of how they were treated in the society. For those of us that are on the outside looking in, that have never been JWs, it's absolutely abhorrent. Absolutely abhorrent.
But the other thing he said, and this is why you can't get through. They can't understand what we're talking about. You're talking to people who think Jeffrey Jackson was photoshopped in there saying apostate things. I mean, stop and think about that. Rather than acknowledge, they can't even acknowledge the possibility of the governing body doing something, that they would go as far as saying the apostates put Photoshop, changed it. They want you to think this. It's not true. It's almost something out of a novel.
Twilight Zone.
Clockwork Orange, something. Oh, just unbelievable.
And Watchtower has asked us to fact check the modern history of Jehovah's Witnesses. And so that's what we're trying to do here on the channel, is fact checking what Watchtower's claimed about their own history versus what we find in the documentation or in the documented record from Watchtower itself. And also stories like this that also don't fit the scriptural interpretation, that completely go beyond the limits of scripture to the point where it's abusive, to the point where somebody feels the need to try and kill themselves. Absolutely terrible.
In abusive, even in the, I agree with this man here again too. I can't imagine if my daughter were in a group of men and what, and I've heard it, and I've heard from other people, girls tell me what they, literally, so what did you do? And then what? It's, again, it's almost as if they're like watching a porn or something, listening to it legally without Jehovah watching you in your privacy of your room. But to want to, why would you want to put a girl through that? Or a boy, but a girl in this case. And I just can't imagine Peter, the Apostle Peter, taking one of the first century Christian girls and, okay, what'd you do? And then what did the Roman soldier do to you? And then what? Did you touch him here? It's just absolute insanity what they do. And what's worse is they don't, both them and the rank and file don't see anything wrong with it. They think they're doing what is right.
And that is the sad part. If they would just look at these scriptures as we have in our discussion here and see where the line is drawn, what the limits are that scripture gives on these actions, how far should they go or how far is too far?
And the history.
And the history behind, and the history behind the, and then, again, fact check the modern history of Jehovah's Witnesses and fact check it not only from the historical record, but from the scriptural record and see if they match.
We're adding a little addendum to an already sad discussion that we were having on disfellowshipping. We were going to release a video in the upcoming week or two on an interview Jeff personally handled with someone who was leaving the organization and suffering from the disfellowshipping issues himself. And unfortunately, in part of the story, it turned deadly and had a tragic turnaround of events that were changing our schedule a little bit. And we've included this addendum into a discussion we're having on disfellowship. We hope it helps people see the point we're trying to make.
I've been in discussions with Michael almost every single day for several months. Those messages stopped a few days ago, and I found out, unfortunately, that Michael has taken his own life. Now, what Michael did not mention is that his family is related to Marley Cole, who wrote Jehovah's Witnesses, The New World Society, and Triumphant Kingdom. So 2 of the Jehovah's Witness history books. So he's always been interested in the history of the Watchtower Society and found our channel. And since we're not Jehovah's Witnesses, he was also able to show many of our videos to his wife so that the modern history of Watchtower can be fact-checked, just as they've asked us to do. So back in October of last year, Michael said, My wife is a devout witness. I have to be careful or I will be shunned. So this was just the starting of his story. He says he was a high-ranking elder, but he was completely terrified of losing his wife and his children. He had told me that even one of his daughters had said to him, Daddy, if you're disfellowshipped, I will no longer be able to talk to you. And in the snippet of the video that you saw, Michael said specifically that this has taken a toll on him mentally and psychologically.
He made a comment, and he's not, sadly, he's not the only one. He made a comment, someone else he knows in a mental health facility, possibly, and being cared for and whatnot. This is not unique. The more Jeff and I investigate into a lot of this stuff and the more contacts that are being made, the more you see the common denominator here. This is not isolated incidents. This is more commonplace than it even should be. So go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say that, since we've never been Jehovah's Witnesses, these stories should not have touched us personally, as never having been Jehovah's Witnesses as they have. Michael had become a good friend, and we were sending encouragements back to each other almost every day. We talked to each other a lot on the phone. And he was very discouraged about some of the things that was going on between the elders and his family members. So back in October, I have been upset. The elders are trying to turn my children against me. And he was actually in the process of filing a restraining order. Because, with the Jehovah's Witnesses on their Zoom meetings at home, they at least had some distance. But the elders kept coming and knocking on their door and doing various things, per what Michael said, and we'll get a little bit more into that. Also, at the end of October, Michael said, the elders are trying to get my wife to leave. They tell her I'm in a spiritual danger. And he said that in his little discussion there, that, the elders were saying that he committed spiritual adultery, that he was not being a father to his children spiritually, and so that they were encouraging her to leave him.
And again, Jeff, we had this in our discussion. I said this, but I don't remember it being like that. And they would, like I said before earlier, they would encourage you, take the beatings, suffer, show everybody you're a witness and can take it. It's hard to believe they've evolved into this. Leave them because they're spiritual and sickness and this and that. But what it goes to show is, even if it started with good intentions, every man-made organization, when they try and take it upon themselves to administer what God wants and go above and beyond what the Bible says, it always goes this path. To sit there and evolve into now telling people to leave their spouses if they're not Jehovah's Witnesses, that's a whole new level of beyond the scriptures than I even remember being around it. I think my grandmother would probably be a little shocked at it if she got a time machine, went forward with what she knew. I'm sure being around it, her whole life and then continuing, it's slowly indoctrinated, so it wouldn't affect her as much. But coming even like what are those Truth Faith witnesses in Romania who they got isolated from the witnesses, and the theories and doctrines changed so much they couldn't believe it.
Yeah, it took decades, and they came out and it was completely different.
Yeah, and that's honestly, that's what I'm seeing with this. it's crazy. There's no other word for it other than crazy. I couldn't imagine going to somebody's home and telling them, hey, you need to get away from your spouse. They're spiritually diseased and it could affect you. Unless there's something, unless they're now, when the women were being beaten to a pulp, they wouldn't say get away, it could hurt you. But now it's just everything they do is backwards. Everything.
I know that the Elder's Manual states that normal family relations should continue. But the rank and file don't have the Elder's Manual. They don't know what's in it.
And Jeff, the elders don't, it's in writing, but there's something going on in the background. Yeah, we know it says that, but it's like, yeah, tell the people they could go to college. But in the Elder's Manual, if someone's son is going to college, you might want to consider whether they should have privileges and all this and that. So there's always two versions of what they say. One, there's the Watchtower for us, then there's the Watchtower for the public. I mean, I don't recall there being First Timothy to Timothy and then First Timothy to the Corinthian congregation, another one for the Romans. It was one writing. Me, if I were around it now, and I'd be asking, why do we have two different copies of the Watchtower? Why can't we share? But they know the stuff they teach you until you're sucked in is just so bizarre. You're not going to join if you know up front what it is. So,
yeah. Michael had also told me that he says, I have no friends. That cult has turned everyone against me. You have to understand, I was on the top. Now I'm on the bottom. He lost everything, all his friends that he knew for decades. He wasn't allowed to have any friends outside of Watchtower when he was a Jehovah's Witness. And then when he left because he questioned a lot of these, what the elders are doing in their private meetings, he lost everything. And then they were trying to even take the family from him as well, per what he had told us.
and he said something that I've seen people who have left and who have had incident. And what he said was, I wrote them a letter. I can't count how many people wrote these people letters to the society, to this. It's like it goes in one ear and out the other with them. That no matter how many letters are thrown at them, they're like, okay, thank you. And then they move on in the same direction that caused all the problems. But the people, there's something, they just want to get it off their chest. And that's half the problem too, is a lot of these people can't get it off their chest. It's like confronting the person who raped you or beat you to a pulp or threw you in prison falsely for 25 years. You want to sit down. Why'd you do this to me? Oh, well, never mind. I'm and just being ignored. These people get no resolution to anything that's happened to them because of the doctrines and the effects of the religion that has on them.
And as we've discussed, they've taken these scriptures about disfellowshipping and moved it beyond the limits of what the scriptures say and made it something completely different, just to control who they can talk to, who they can be with, and even to control if their family could stay together as one unit.
Now, it reminds me of a story when I was young, and we're talking back when I went with my grandmother, 8, 9 years old. There was a very seriously mentally challenged woman that they knocked on her door, and she was so bad. I don't know how she even managed to live on her own. She really needed someone to take care of her. She needed a mother, to have her. And lo and behold, they found her and they witnessed, of course, she, comes and she, they love bomb her and all that. And she had 2 kids. And she progressed to the point, they progressed her to the point of baptism, which I don't know how you could sit there and ask the questions that I've seen you ask somebody and her level of competence to say, okay, other than we're just looking for numbers, go get baptized. And I remember her son was about my age and he was in the elementary school we went to, and he pooped himself and he was extremely slow and he's running around not knowing what's going on. And they had to get someone to come in, and the mother, it's the whole thing. The whole family was a mess. I remember my grandmother went to visit her and offer her encouragement and whatnot. And the home was something you wouldn't let your dog in. It was filthy. It had to be. It's just a mess. But she didn't know any better. Well, sadly, someone took advantage of her, and it wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. As memory serves me, I think it was a trucker, some trucker who would breeze in and out of town. For whatever reason, chose to engage in a sexual relationship with her. And I mean, she's not competent to make a decision. And here she is going to the elders confessing it. They disfellowshipped her. I mean, here is someone obviously incapable of making, and now you sucked her into something, love bomb her, give her some sort of hope, give her friend, something that she didn't, and I'll give them that. They gave her more than what she had in that aspect of things. And then they dropped her. She wasn't, I mean, looking back at that, it's like, who makes these decisions? I mean, I know if you and I were two elders dealing with this, it would be, okay, sister, we understand. Well, just do your best. Trying to, when he calls, you could call, something, but not kick her out for gross sin. I mean, it's just their reasoning. Just, I can't wrap my head around it.
But some of these elders do what they want to do anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because the rank and file really don't know. For those of us who have never been witnesses, from the outside looking in, this doesn't look to be Christian whatsoever.
Mm-mm.
I mean, Michael had wrote to me.
Inside out, they think it is.
Yeah.
Which is the irony of it. It's just the opposite. Go ahead, Jeff, I'm sorry.
Michael had wrote to me. He said that the elders even contacted his daughter where she worked, and that they were worried about her spiritually because apparently he turned atheist. And he says, he basically said he was going to get a restraining order because he says, I'm not an atheist, I'm a believer. Why are they even going to his daughters?
How
trying
old
to turn
is
the
she?
family.
Do you know how old she was?
No. I don't know. Teenager.
Okay, that's odd. I mean, I would not, as an adult male, go to somebody's teenage daughter and say stuff like that. It's just inappropriate at the very least.
It's a horror story, honestly. Literally a horror story. He told me that he was having a hard time holding it together because the elders kept pounding his family. One thing after another. Again and again, he would say that he was a good person. He had to keep telling himself that because he's been told so many times that he's not a good person by the elders.
And also, you're being pummeled by, you could do more. You're not worthy of life. Life is a gift to you. You're not worthy of it. If you do this, probably you'll be saved in the day of Jehovah's fury. They do beat people to death with not measuring up. And mental health wise, that's not a good thing. I mean, if you raised your child, without encouragement, but rather negativity, you did this wrong. Oh my God, how stupid you are. And you do. Yeah, of course a parent's going to do that once in a while, flabbergasted at something stupid their child would do. But you don't do it on a continual basis. And that's what what they get a lot of. And then right when they bring them to the edge of that, oh, but Jehovah loves you, so you're going to be okay. Oh, wait, the hours went down this month. We need to shake the fear into them again. I did see that, and I used to joke with my grandmother about that. It is, but some people, everybody's different. And some people have more resistance to stress, more coping ability. I'm not saying that's good or bad. Everybody has different levels of different abilities. But this religion is not designed for someone who's sensitive. That's a lack of a better word. Who is sensitive, or who has a hard time with self-esteem or anything. It could shatter you.
Well, because of Michael's story, because he was a friend, I went from being completely devastated by this to being very, very angry. Angry at how these policies are causing people to either to attempt to take their own lives or to actually do it, as in Michael's case. It's abhorrent. This should not be. This is not Christian. Michael said that he was invited to his judicial committee and he was afraid to go because he was afraid to lose his family. And his own daughter said that she won't speak to him if he would be disfellowshipped. He was going to lose his own family living in the same house.
That's why I guess we get a lot of emails and stuff to the channel of people. They're just afraid to come out and say they're not PMO. When you told me that term, I was like, what on earth is a PMO? Physically and mentally out. I'm like, what is that? I mean, it's always been hard to understand. I think, and I'll admit, my understanding of the religion has gotten more over the past year than I remembered or recollected, unless it's just changed so much. Yeah, there were oddities in it back then, but they were more oddities that you can laugh about. You know, something stupid would happen. You know, it wasn't to the extent that I'm seeing now, and it's why they let people. And without, I'm trying not to offend anybody, but I think the elders would know not to come to my door and pull crap like that. They're fortunate enough to have people who, whatever, are afraid of them or have some level of courtesy or whatever, and come in and disrupt the life. I mean, I would be like, get out of my house. If I catch you here again, I'm not responsible for what happens. But they feel there's something about the elders. They feel they have the right to just enter your home and manipulate you, say whatever they want, do whatever you want.
Well, because of COVID, there was some limited contact between the members because they had shut everything down. But there were moments, and Michael had said that when the elders came to his door, knocked on his door, they said inappropriate things to his wife. So he had to file a restraining order, he said, back in January. I mean, another one of the elders from the congregation there, he had said, was telling his wife she should leave him and marry him instead, and then he would take care of her because he had committed spiritual adultery. This is what Michael had said. It's just unbelievable. But after they went back in April and started attending the Kingdom Hall in person again, Michael said that his wife was getting love bombed and they were pressuring her more and more. And without Michael being there, it really became a difficult thing for him to handle mentally and psychologically, he said. It was, and the results were tragic, absolutely horrifying. Michael was also seeing a therapist, and I know that it's okay for the witnesses to see a therapist as long as they don't bring reproach upon Jehovah's name. But Michael had said that he was telling the witness, trying to get her to understand what were the reasons why this situation was happening in his family. And that caused dissension and trouble as well, because, it makes Jehovah's Witnesses look bad when, in fact, he was telling the truth. As he said,
and that's a hard that's a hard pill to swallow, Jeff, because it's like here in print, we're the God's mouthpiece on earth, direct divine channel. You listen to us. We only this organization, all that, telling you all that. Now they're in front of the Royal Commission. Oh, well, that would be presumptuous to think that we, only us, blah, blah, blah. You have to, in order to be in the religion, you have to believe a fantasy, or you have to believe a reality that's their reality, and it can change. And whatever the reality at that moment is where at that point in time, you're supposed to say, okay, 1 minute, they're God's mouthpiece. The next minute, oh, no, they're not. Well, a normal person can't do that. A normal person would be like, okay, wait, which is it? Are you the mouthpiece or are you not? Make up and once and for all, let's decide this. But a lot of them go back and forth. And I've seen it with friends, family, relatives, where they'll deny something that's in writing. Oh, well, yeah, I remember. Okay, well, then you lied to me when you said you literally have to sit in a half delusional world of make-believe in order to maintain any sort of membership to the organization.
Michael had told me that the elders kept telling him that he was worthless, a deadbeat dad, as he said in his own recorded testimony there. Yet he was working 3 jobs, he had said, in order
one
to
of them
support.
was full-time. It wasn't several part-time jobs. A full-time job with benefits. Go ahead, Jeff.
He was working 3 jobs to try and support his family and keep them in the lifestyle that they were. And yet there were points where he was sleeping in his truck. There were points that he was sleeping in his truck because he felt like he couldn't go home, that he was losing his family. This is what he had said. It's so tragically depressing, so sad that it's difficult to talk about. The last thing that Michael wrote me was Monday last week. He said the Watchtower has done damage, and there were some issues because he was seeing a therapist. And I had a rough night that night. I got a call at 1, 2 in the morning from work, and had to work, and then had trouble getting back to sleep. So I struggled to even get through work that day, and took a nap in the afternoon. And so Tuesday I didn't write. Monday I didn't write back to him. Tuesday I had the same issue. I wrote back to him Wednesday morning. It was too late, and I feel so depressed that I didn't take 5 minutes just to send him a note that I was thinking about him, that I was praying about him. But it's so important for these stories to be out there. He wanted this to be. He wanted his story to be made known as far and wide as it could be, to show what Watchtower was doing to his family through these unscriptural doctrines, through these unscriptural practices.
What's sad, though, Jeff, is here we have an incident that could literally be directly associated with what happened. But the Watchtower will get a hold of the family, convince them it's Jehovah's will, this, and that, and all that, and nothing's ever done about it. It's they're going to hide it. It gets the kids aren't going to sue because they're taught Watchtower thing. So this is a problem that just can't get resolved until people understand what the whole Jehovah's Witness doctrine and mentality is. And like we said in our discussion, it is in these courts that are having, like at the Royal Australian Commission, all that, they need people like us who, when they're making, Geoffrey Jackson is making statements, they've got a Paul and a Jeff. Oh, well, no, that's not what according to the Watchtower said. You're wrong. So the courts and the authorities have no idea what's going on in the background in this. And again, the families don't come forward because they're Jehovah's Witnesses. And they're beaten, don't bring reproach upon Jehovah's name, and we'll shun you too. You don't want to be on the outskirts now. You're a single mom, you know. But I hate to say it, in those cases, half of the time they're over it. A year later, they're married to somebody else. So
the unfortunate and tragic results of Watchtower's interpretation of this disfellowship doctrine causes stories like this to happen.
And another sad note is we didn't anticipate on this being part of our disfellowship discussion. Sadly, it only proves the whole point we were trying to make in our whole discussion and reason for bringing this subject to light and to matter.
We were going to post his testimony that I recorded a couple of months ago in person when we met. We were going to post it in about a week. But because of Michael taking his own life this week, a funeral was yesterday, we decided it was very important to get this story out there, to let Michael tell his own story, and for us to finish it for him, to show the tragic results of what Watchtower's disfellowship doctrine is doing for some of Watchtower's followers.
And Jeff and I are not concerned about views or subscribers. How many? This isn't about any numbers, but this is a video. We'll ask in the rare instance, please pass this one around. Let other people see what's going on.
As we said earlier on when we were talking about this, we've never been Jehovah's Witnesses. From the outside looking in, this looks to be as unchristian a practice as there ever could be, especially with these type of tragic results. This needs to stop. The love of Christ, following the scriptures on what disfellowship actually means, trying to help your brother or sister. The golden rule, doing unto others as you would have them do unto you, will bring about good results rather than these type of situations. A lot of witnesses say, well, those XJWs, they're lying about this situation. Well, I've never been a Jehovah's Witness. Right?
And I've been around it enough to know not to commit to it.
Yeah. So as a non-Jehovah's Witness, seeing the tragic results touching me personally from somebody I know or knew, it's very discouraging. This is not something that would attract me to Jehovah's Witnesses. And seeing the disfellowship doctrine played so much even at their conventions is something to be encouraged to do. The way that Watchtower interprets it goes way beyond the limits of Scripture to the point that it ends in these type of tragic stories.
But it leaves the question, can a group of people who believe that God is going to slaughter billions of people in a battle of Armageddon be any kinder than to accept the disfellowshipping doctrine the way they do it? Either way, everything is coming at you with punishment and hate. And as we have a future discussion, we're going to show where all the hate came from in the timeline of everything. So stay tuned for that one too.
Watchtower presents Watchtower presents their doctrine as a message of hope. When we see things like this, it's literally a message of hate. Thank you, everyone, for your time.